I'm 76 years old. 53 years I was married to my wife, Martha. 2 years and change since I stood at the hillside behind Spruce Creek Baptist and watched them lower her into the ground next to our boy Caleb and my daddy Earl. All of them on the same hillside. All of them gone now. And I want to tell you something tonight that took me 76 years to learn. I don't know a single man of my generation who ever thought about what he wanted the last years of his life to look like. Not one. We thought about the mortgage. We thought about getting the kids raised and getting the crop in and keeping the wood box full through January. We thought about what needed doing. The last years was something that happened to other people, older people, people we'd visit in nursing homes with flowers from the gas station and wouldn't know how to look at straight after. The last years were not something you aimed at. They were something that came at you, like weather. You didn't plan for them. You survived them. I want to change that tonight. I'm fixing to tell you 5 things I had to learn the hard way at 76 that I wish somebody had sat me down and told me at 45, at 50, at 60 even. If I'd known these 5 things at 60, Martha and I might have. Well, I won't get ahead of myself. I aim to tell you all 5. But first I need you to understand what I mean when I say the last years. Sit a spell with me. If this lands somewhere close to true for you tonight, would you say something down in the comments? Write your name. Tell me where you're from. The next person who finds this video will know you were here before them, and that goes further than you think. My daddy Earl used to say, sitting on this same porch in the summer of 1965, a man does what needs doing. He don't talk about it. I was 16 years old. I took that as gospel. I believed him for 60 years. I put up 6 cords of wood every fall. I kept the well running and the roof tight and the truck in good working order. I showed up every day for 53 years and did what needed doing, and never once, not once, asked myself, what do I actually want the last years of my life to look like? What does Martha want them to look like? Because we were not raised to ask that question. Not the men I knew. Not Earl Wilson's boy from Wilson Hollow, West Virginia. We were raised to endure. We were raised to provide. We were raised to be the thing that did not break, so that everything around us could stay standing. And there is honor in that. I am not saying there is not, but there is a difference between honor and living. And most of the men I knew spent their whole lives doing one and never touched the other. That is not a life. That is a load-bearing wall. I've seen it go 3 ways for a man who never plans for the last years. The first is he keeps working until the work stops him. A heart attack in the woodlot, or a stroke on the way to the feed store, and the last years never come at all. The second is he retires and doesn't know what to do with himself. So he sits, and the sitting becomes the man. And within 5 years he is plumb worn out and forgotten what he was for. The third, and the one I know best from the inside, he waits. Waits for something to shift. Waits for the right time. And the right time is never now. And the waiting becomes its own kind of life. And one day you look up, and the waiting is what you did instead of living. Waiting is not a plan. Waiting is what you do when you don't have one. I see men of my generation everywhere I look. I see them in the feed store in Marlinton, loading bags of seed the same way they've done it for 40 years. I see them at Spruce Creek Baptist on Sunday mornings, sitting in the same pew they sat in 1981. I see them in the comments on these videos. I can tell who they are. Men who have been waiting their whole lives for the work to be done so they can start living. And the work is never done. The mortgage gets paid, and there's a new fence that needs replacing. The kids grow up, and the grandkids need watching. The last years were always going to start after the next thing. and the next, and the thing after that. I see women too. I see widows watching these videos. I know it from the comments. Women who spent 40, 50 years married to men like me. Men who showed up, who were loyal, who did the work without being asked, and never once said out loud what they were doing all of it for. Women sitting right now in houses that have gone quiet, looking at chairs nobody pulls out anymore, asking themselves whether the man they loved them back in a way they could feel. I know that question. I know it because I am the man who gave it to Martha without meaning to. That is not love. That is labor in the wrong language. A man who splits a cord of wood in October so his family won't be cold in January is not a man without love. He is a man whose love got expressed in the only language he was ever given. The tragedy is not that he didn't love. The tragedy is that the people he loved most never got to hear it in a form they could receive. A cord of wood is warm. It keeps you alive through the cold, but it cannot hear you, and it cannot hold you back. And at the end, when the last cord is split and the last winter comes, what remains is not the warmth. What remains is the silence where the words should have been. That is what I'm fixing to talk to you about tonight. There's a knife in my pocket right now that belonged to my daddy Earl. He handed it to me in the summer of 1962. I was 13 years old, and I have had it on my person every single day since. 63 years. It's a simple thing. 3-blade pocket knife, bone handle worn smooth. One blade that got broken in 1978 and was re-welded by a man named Buck Harmon, who worked block and stone around the hollow. There is no good reason to carry a knife that's been re-welded, but I carry it because it was his, and because there is a kind of love that does not know how to show itself, except to say, "Here, take this, you'll need it." That is how my daddy Earl showed me what I meant to him. He gave me the most useful thing he had without ceremony, without explanation. He said, "Here, Tom, you'll be needing a good knife." And that was that. I was 13 and I understood it was love, even if neither of us would have said so. He told me something once. I reckon I was 20, maybe 21. It was the year before he got the cough looked at for the first time. He said, "You can carry a heavy thing a long way if you don't set it down to look at it." He meant Curtis, my brother, dead 2 years by then, in a rice field in Vietnam. We had not once talked about Curtis directly, my daddy and I. Not his name, not what it cost. My daddy was telling me, in the only language he had, that the way to get through grief was to keep moving, not set it down. My daddy was right about almost everything, except that. Because here is what I have learned at 76 that I could not have told you at 20 or 40 or 60. The things you carry without setting them down do not stay the same weight. They grow heavier. Every year you add to the carry without looking at it, the load increases. The cord of wood you split in the fall to keep the family warm. You lay it in, you stack it up, you don't examine it. You just keep adding to it year after year. And one day you look up and the stack is so high it is blocking the light you needed to see by. That is the cord I laid in. 53 years of mornings, of doing what needed doing, of loving Martha in the silent language Earl handed me. The cord was enormous. It was everything I knew how to build, and I built it so high and so dense that it kept everything standing, everything running, everything warm. But it also kept us from a certain closeness that you only understand when you are looking back from the other side of a funeral. Martha used to say on first frost mornings that the mountain was wearing its good coat. She'd come out on the back porch in her robe, both hands around the tin mug, and say it the same way every year, like a piece of small scripture. I didn't understand it while she was standing there. I understand it now. The mountain puts on its good coat the morning everything changes. The morning the warm goes cold, and what you have left is clarified. That is the morning I want to bring you to tonight. I'll get to the 5 things. I aim to. But I needed you to see the chord first. All right, the first thing. I knew a man named Henry. He lives about a half-mile down from Wilson Hollow. 77 years old or thereabouts now. Good man, good neighbor. The kind of man who waves when he passes you on the road and means it. Every fall he put up his wood the same as I put up mine. His wife Barbara died 15, 16 years ago, I reckon. And after Barbara went, Henry just quieted. He was already a quiet man, but after Barbara he went still. The way a pond goes still in October when nothing is moving it. He kept his wood up. He mowed his grass. He came to church every Sunday in the same truck he'd had for 20 years. Present in all the visible ways, absent in every way that counted. I saw him once, a couple of years after Barbara passed, at the feed store in Marlinton. He was buying a single can of soup, 1 can, not 2, not a dozen, 1 can of soup. He had learned to provision for 1 person, and he had done it without complaining, without drama. He had quietly adapted himself to the smallest life that would still allow him to be considered living. That is not grief, that is reduction. And the first thing I had to learn is this: the last years are not about getting smaller. Every instinct a man of my generation has will tell him to shrink after loss, eat less, need less, ask for less, take up less room. I did the same. I ate soup alone for 6 weeks after Martha and called it fine. But the last years are not about getting smaller. They are about finally arriving at the size you should have been all along. The second thing, I knew a woman named Mabel. She lived about 2 hollows over from us, a widow for most of the time I knew her. Mabel was waiting. She was always waiting for her son Lloyd to come from Columbus, Ohio. He called on birthdays, sometimes at Christmas, and Mabel talked about him the way you talk about something you can see from a distance but cannot reach. I don't know if Lloyd was a bad son. I reckon he wasn't. He was probably just a man too busy to understand that his mother was keeping a candle lit for him, and that the candle was burning down. Mabel died at 87. She had grown up beautiful, I'm told. Had a laugh you could hear from across a creek bottom. She died the way she'd lived the last 20 years, quietly, waiting, diminished. Lloyd came to the funeral. He stood at the grave and I watched his face. I will not say what I thought I saw there. Some things you don't name out loud. The second thing, the last years cannot be spent waiting for someone to give you permission to live them. Mabel waited for Lloyd. I waited for the work to be done. Half the folks at Spruce Creek Baptist are waiting for their children to move closer, or for the pain to ease, or for some signal they can't quite name that it is finally time. It is already time. That signal is not coming from outside you. You have to make it yourself. The third thing, a man named Wendell, retired school teacher from Marlinton, lost his wife about 8 years before I got to know him well, and he had done with her passing exactly what I did after Martha. Survived it without quite living through it. His life was orderly and correct and entirely empty of anything he actually wanted. He had a son in Raleigh who didn't call often. He had a daughter who visited twice a year. He had his pew and his truck and a lot of correctly kept silence. But somewhere around year 3 or 4 after his wife died, Wendell started calling people, not just his children. He reached back further. Men he'd lost track of over the years. A man he'd taught school with for 20 years who had moved to Tennessee. A cousin up in Elkins he hadn't spoken to since 1999. He called them on Saturday mornings. No particular agenda, no purpose except to talk. He told me once sitting on his porch in the fall of the year. I believe it was an October morning, a year or 2 before he died. He said, "I used to think I had to earn a conversation, had to have something worth saying first. Then I ran out of years for that kind of pride." Wendell died at 79. He had about 8 good years at the end of his life, present, connected, willing to say the thing out loud when it needed saying. He still grieved his wife. He still missed his classroom. But he was alive in those years in a way he had not been in the 10 before them. And the third thing I had to learn is this: the last years get better when you stop waiting to earn the right to say what you feel. You have already paid for that right. 70 years is payment enough. The fourth thing is harder to say, and I'm going to say it because I don't want to stand here talking about Henry and Mabel and Wendell and leave myself out of the accounting. I am the same man. I am just the same man in a different telling. I never once asked Martha, not in 53 years of marriage, not once, what she wanted the last years of her life to look like. I assumed she wanted what I was already giving her. The cabin kept, the wood in, the truck running, the bills paid. I thought if she wanted something different, she would say so. Martha was not a woman who held back when she had something to say. But I have come to understand that she didn't tell me what she wanted because she didn't want to add one more thing to what I was already carrying. She loved me by not asking for 53 years, and I missed it. The fourth thing: the last years require you to ask the question you have been afraid to ask. What does the person beside you need from you that you have never thought to give? Not what you've always given. What have they never asked for because they knew you were already at the limit? Ask it while there is still someone there to answer. And the fifth thing, this one I didn't learn until I was sitting alone at this kitchen table with nobody else in the house. There is a word for what kept me from the last years for so long. I thought for most of my life that I was just thorough, responsible, a man keeping to the code. But the word is not thoroughness. The word is not the code. The word is silence. Not quiet, silence. Quiet is what you choose when you sit at dusk and listen to Spruce Creek come down. Quiet is a gift you give yourself. Silence is what gets chosen for you, and you go along with it because everyone around you is going along with it. And after long enough, you forget there was ever anything else. Silence is what you inherit when nobody in the line before you ever learned to name what they felt. My daddy Earl didn't know how. His daddy before him didn't know either. And so I got the silence, and I carried it, and I passed it on. I passed it on to Daniel and to my boy Caleb before Caleb died. And that is the part I am most sorry for. My daddy Earl was not a cold man. I want you to understand that. He was not cold, not absent, not careless with the people he loved. He was a man who had been handed the silence 40 years before I was born, and he did the only thing you can do with something handed to you as a child. He carried it. He carried it the same way he carried everything, without complaint, without explanation, without once setting it down to look at it. He loved us in the only language he ever had. I reckon the good Lord will account for that. But I am done carrying it now. The silence stops here. That was the fifth thing. I want to mention something before I let you go tonight. I almost don't want to. Ruth Ann would be mad at me if I didn't say it, so I'll say it briefly. About a year after Martha passed, I started writing letters. Not on a computer. I don't own one. By hand. At this kitchen table on a yellow legal pad. Letters to Martha, letters to my boy Caleb, who has been gone since 2009. Letters to my daddy Earl, who died of the black lung in 1968, before I ever told him what he meant to me. Letters I should have given when there was still somebody to give them to. I called it The Things We Don't Say. Letters I should have given when there was still somebody to give them to. I wasn't going to show them to anybody. They were mine. Then my daughter Ruth Ann brought me supper one Wednesday evening. She brings it on Wednesdays. And she saw the box sitting on the kitchen table. And before I could stop her, she sat out on the back porch and read 3 of them. She was out there 20 minutes. When she came back inside, she'd been crying. She said, "Daddy, you gotta let other people see these. There's mamas out there. There's widows out there. They need to read these." I said no. She kept asking. We went back and forth for about 3 months. She has her mother's stubbornness. In the end, I said yes. A woman named Doris. She's 77. She lives in North Carolina, married 54 years. She read the book one evening and told her husband at breakfast the next morning that she loved him. She said he set down his coffee and stared at her for a full minute before he set it back. She said it was the longest minute of her life. A woman named Pearl. She is 80 years old. She lives in Pennsylvania. She lost a son a long time ago. Couldn't say his name out loud for 11 years. After she read the letter I wrote to Caleb, she said her son's name at the kitchen sink. Said it 3 times. Then she made his favorite dinner for the first time since he passed. And a woman named Eunice, 78, in Tennessee. She sat down with her husband of 51 years. That same night she finished the book and told him things she had never said out loud in all those years together. He cried like a child, she said. Then they sat on the porch and watched the dark come in. My son Daniel called me from Charlotte last week. Said he wasn't sure I should have put this out there. Said it's family business. Says his mother wouldn't have wanted strangers reading these letters. He might be right. I might take it down. I'm still thinking on it. I put a link in the first comment pinned under this video. It's there if you need it. That's all I'll say about it. Anyway, where was I? Right, the cord of wood. The cord I told you about. The one I laid in for 53 years without ever lighting the fire beneath it. I want you to know the cord is still there. All of it. All those years of it. The love I put into that work. The mornings I got up before light and walked out into the cold. The 53 years of keeping everything running. None of that disappeared when Martha did. The work was real. I don't regret the work. What I regret is the words I withheld. Not the labor, the language. Here is what I can tell you from where I stand. The fire I have at 76, and there is a fire now, finally. It is burning from the same cord I laid in all those years. Nothing was wasted. Every winter's wood I cut to keep them warm is part of the cord the fire is drawing on now. It just took me 76 years to strike the match. If you're listening to me tonight, friend, if you are sitting somewhere in a house that has gone quiet, or beside someone you love but can't seem to find the right words for, or looking at the last years of your life, trying to figure out what to do with what you have left, I want you to know that the cord is still there for you too. Whatever you have given without saying why, whatever you have carried without once setting it down to look at it, it is not lost. It is stacked and dry and waiting for you to light it. The letters are still in the pinned comment if you need them. The 5 things I told you tonight are not complicated. They are just what a late man finally understood after 76 years of not understanding it. You might still be in time to understand them earlier than I did. I hope you are. I'm a late man, friend. Don't you be one too.